So what exactly is intimate partner violence? Intimate partner violence is a pattern of behaviors used by one partner to maintain power and control over another partner in an intimate relationship. So hopefully for us in this field, we know intimate partner violence is not just limited to physical violence. And in a couple of slides, we'll talk about various forms of intimate partner violence. Intimate partner violence encompasses all forms of abusive behaviors. But I think it's important to know that because I have clients still that I work with that come in that are experiencing emotional abuse, psychological abuse, gaslighting, and they don't even realize that that is a form of abuse. Because sometimes people have this view that if we're experiencing abuse in a relationship, it means that we're being hit by our partner, we're being beaten by our partner, And so it's really important just to highlight and point out that intimate partner violence encompasses so many varying forms of abuse. Intimate partner violence, when we talk about this pattern of behaviors that we say here in this first part of the definition. So what this means is that when we see intimate partner violence in relationships, certainly it could be that there's a one-time occurrence, but oftentimes what we see in our office is that it's not an isolated event, that there are these repetitive behaviors that perpetrators are using in the relationship to maintain power and control over their partner. And that power and control piece, what this really highlights and means is this is where one person is seeking to dominate or to manipulate their partner by using varying forms of abuse, such as physical abuse, emotional abuse, economic abuse, sexual abuse, all of the various forms. And a lot of times there's kind of this, I don't want to say, I don't think it's like a myth as much as it can be this view that some people have that, either intimate partner violence doesn't happen, to people in my life, or intimate partner violence is something that happens behind closed doors, so it doesn't impact me. And really nothing can be further from the truth. So intimate partner violence has consequences, and honestly, devastating consequences for both the survivor, but also for society. So it does have, physical health related aftermaths. It does have mental health related effects. It does cause strained relationships, and it even has societal costs as well. And I don't have any of the specific numbers on that, but I do. I do on my computer somewhere if you were ever interested in that. So, but the reason why I share that is intimate partner violence is a problem, a public health problem that we should all be acknowledging and looking at and talking about and discussing and finding ways to support people who are experiencing intimate partner violence. So here you have the domestic violence / intimate partner violence occurs in all settings and among all socioeconomic, religious, and cultural groups. So anyone, any age, any gender, any sort from any culture can be a victim of intimate partner violence. Let me hold on one second. My computer is doing something weird. Here we go. There we go. Some screens are popping up. So anyone can certainly be a victim of intimate partner violence. No one is immune to intimate partner violence, and it can really happen to anyone, irrespective of their background or their identity or their gender. And I think this is important to really highlight and acknowledge. A couple of years ago, I had a client who came in, male client, and we were talking about the experiences that they had while in relationship with their ex, who they currently had to co-parent with, and throughout now this co-parenting phase of their relationship. And they were talking about these various dynamics that were happening in their relationship, and it was really, really clear and evident that the client was experiencing emotional abuse. And so when I brought this term up to my client, and the reason why I share this little clinical story with you, I remember very, very, very vividly, the client looked at me and said, I didn't even know that I could experience intimate partner violence. They had a viewpoint and they expanded upon it that A, it was physical, and B, that they were a man and they were the male in the relationship. And so thus they couldn't be a victim. And I have to tell you, it was one of those very eye-opening clinical moments for my client, a very aha moment, where there was this recognition and also this relief that came with this recognition. Once we put a label on it, once we said, hey, this really meets the criteria for emotional abuse, the client, it was like just this like, wow, I had no idea, but that makes so much more sense based upon everything that they were experiencing. And so when we talk about screening, we're going to talk about really why it is just so important that we are screening all of our clients, because anybody can experience intimate partner violence. So there are a lot of different types of intimate partner violence, and we'll briefly just go through just to give you an idea what each of these means. Some you probably feel more familiar with than others. So physical abuse, I think, is, again, that one prevailing form of abuse that oftentimes people think when we're talking about intimate partner violence, that's what we're talking about. Physical abuse involves the intentional use of force or harm, so to injure a partner, causing them any sort of physical pain or injury. So this looks like hitting, this can look like slapping. Any form of violent physical control can fall under this category. Sexual abuse and coercion. This refers to any sort of non-consensual sexual activities or any sort of manipulative tasks that a perpetrator will use to try and force the other person into unwanted sexual acts. Emotional abuse. So emotional abuse and really like psychological abuse, sometimes you hear them referred to or kind of categorized in the same way. I kind of always think of it as like emotional abuse and psychological abuse is kind of tucked under that. But within that spectrum of emotional abuse are behaviors such as humiliation, manipulation, constant criticism. And really the goal here with emotional abuse is to diminish the victim's self-esteem, right? And their emotional well-being. And you would also see in this category of emotional abuse, this is where you would see, and I think terms that we're very used to hearing about and talking about these days, narcissistic abuse as well as gaslighting would fall here. Financial abuse. So financial abuse involves controlling or restricting a partner's access to any sort of financial resources. So what this does when the perpetrator uses financial abuse in a relationship as a means to gain power and control, they make this other person financially dependent upon them, right? This other person becomes very powerless. This can look like taking somebody's paycheck. This can look like not giving someone an access to like any sort of money, whether it's a debit card or credit card, bank account. Financial abuse can really be present in relationships in so many various ways. And I forget what the statistic is, but I want to say it's like 80% of, I don't know if it's all abusive relationships or just physically abusive relationships, but 80% of those relationships have components of financial abuse within the relationship. And so we do see that the rate of financial abuse is actually fairly high. But again, clients might not recognize that this is a form of abuse if they're not familiar with the different types of abuse that can happen within these relationships. Spiritual abuse. So spiritual abuse entails manipulating or using a person's religion or whatever their spiritual beliefs are to get some sort of control. So this is done often by distorting or really weaponizing any sort of religious doctrines. Digital abuse. So this encompasses really the use of technology. So this looks like using technology to control, to stalk, to harass, to invade someone's privacy. Any sort of thing that takes place using technology really falls under this category of digital abuse. Reproductive coercion. This is when one partner manipulates another partner or coerces the other partner into making decisions about the use of various forms of contraceptives, whether or not they're going to keep a pregnancy, whether or not they're going to get pregnant. Really, there's a lot of different kind of factors that can fall under this reproductive coercion category. Controlling behaviors. So these are any sort of range of actions where the partner really, the perpetrator, I want to say, the perpetrator really uses various forms of monitoring a person's movements or imposing strict rules on a person to really dominate their partner. This can also look like really isolating people from their friends and family, controlling when somebody has an access to seeing other people, when somebody has an access to talking with other people. Stalking, this involves the persistent and unwanted attention, monitoring, or harassment of a person, making them feel fearful and unsafe. And then coercive control. Coercive control is a pattern of intimidation, isolation, and degradation that really leaves the victim in this situation feeling extremely powerless. They feel extremely trapped in the relationship. And so when we are looking at kind of this whole, like all these various forms and types of abuse that can occur, what I think is really important to highlight, and I have seen repeated over and over and over again in my clinical work, is that oftentimes clients are experiencing more than one form of abuse. And I think when we are screening, it's so important to keep that in mind, that we want to make sure that when we are screening clients, that we are screening for the range of different types of, and different forms, I should say, that abuse can present as in these relationships. This is so important because when I'm not to skip ahead too much, but just because we're here on this slide, but when I'm screening and I'm asking clients about these various forms, I'm actually giving clients examples like, does your partner ever make you feel XYZ? Does your partner ever say, or do things that are, XYZ? And I list out some examples for, something like I would list out examples of physical abuse or emotional abuse, digital abuse, kind of providing clients with what that definition of it is. And the reason for this is because, like I've said already before in this presentation, sometimes our clients don't recognize that they're experiencing abuse. And so it's not until you say, oh, this, and this are actually signs of abuse for a client to go, oh, wow, I didn't even realize that, or I didn't think about that. I had a session with somebody recently who was talking about, really just, they recognize that they're experiencing emotional abuse. But what they said to me in the session was, when I grew up, it was so much worse. And, and my parent experienced physical abuse in addition to the emotional abuse. And they were like, so I feel like I can just keep going. Like I could just keep living like this. Like I know what's coming. I know how to deal with it. I've been dealing with it my whole entire life.